Have you ever felt a chill crawl up your spine while walking alone in the forgotten corners of a city? A feeling that you are being watched by something unseen, something ancient and malevolent. In the soot-stained heart of 1930s Cleveland, amidst the grinding poverty of the Great Depression, a terror far worse than hunger stalked the ramshackle shantytowns. It was a phantom, a butcher who left behind not bodies, but gruesome, mocking puzzles of flesh and bone. The press called him the mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run, but to the desperate souls huddled in the shadows of the industrial flats, he was simply a ghost, a whisper of death that drifted on the foul winds from the Cuyahoga River. My name is Thomas, and I was a beat cop back then, young and full of a naive sort of courage. I walked the cobbled streets of the Roaring Third, a district teeming with gin joints, brothels, and the hollowed-out eyes of the forgotten. We all knew the stories, the hushed rumors of men and women vanishing into the night, only to reappear as dismembered parts scattered across the desolate landscape of Kingsbury Run. It began with the whispers, tales of a hulking shadow seen near the railroad tracks, a figure that moved with an unnatural silence. The old-timers, their minds steeped in the superstitions of the old country, spoke of a Dybbuk, a restless, evil spirit that possessed the living to carry out its gruesome deeds. We, the upholders of the law, scoffed at such notions, preferring to believe in a monster of flesh and blood. The first victim I saw, or rather, the first pieces of a victim, changed everything. We found the torso of a man nestled in a thicket of overgrown weeds near the Jackass Hill. There was no head, no limbs, just a cleanly severed trunk, drained of every last drop of blood. The coroner, a man grown weary of death, remarked on the surgical precision of the cuts, a skill that spoke of a chilling expertise. As the body count grew, a palpable fear gripped the city. People avoided the shadowy expanse of Kingsbury Run, a place that had once been a refuge for the downtrodden, and was now seen as the butcher's personal abattoir. The shanty towns, known as Hoovervilles, became ghost towns after dark, their inhabitants huddled together, listening to the lonely whistle of the trains and praying they wouldn't be the next to vanish. I remember the oppressive summer of '36, the air thick with the stench of the steel mills, and a cloying metallic tang that we all secretly feared was the smell of blood. It was during that summer that the butcher grew bold. He began to leave his macabre trophies in more public places, as if taunting us, taunting the famed lawman Eliot Ness himself, who had been brought in to stop the carnage. One sweltering evening, I was on patrol near the Lorraine Carnegie Bridge when a group of children came running towards me, their faces pale with terror. They spoke of a man made of shadows they had seen near the riverbank, a figure that seemed to glide rather than walk. I dismissed it as childish fantasy, a product of the city's fevered imagination. But as I approached the spot they had indicated, a cold dread washed over me. There, hanging from the bridge's steel girders, was a burlap sack. It was dripping a dark, viscous fluid onto the ground below. With trembling hands, I untied the sack, and its contents spilled out onto the dusty ground. A collection of human limbs, neatly severed and arranged in a grotesque parody of a human form. That night, I couldn't sleep. The image of those dismembered limbs was seared into my mind. I began to wonder if there was something more to the old-timers' tales, if we were truly dealing with something beyond human comprehension. The butcher's cruelty was so profound, so devoid of any recognizable human motive, that it felt like the work of a supernatural force. The investigation, led by the incorruptible Eliot Ness, was relentless. Ness, a man who had faced down Al Capone, was now pitted against a faceless, seemingly omniscient foe. He ordered raids on the Hoovervilles, hoping to flush out the killer. But all it did was deepen the misery of the city's most vulnerable. The butcher, it seemed, was always one step ahead. One night, while on a late-night patrol through the desolate streets of Kingsbury Run, I saw him. A tall, broad-shouldered figure stood silhouetted against the pale moonlight, his face obscured by the shadow of a wide-brimmed hat. He was standing perfectly still, watching me. A primal fear, cold and sharp, pierced through me. I drew my revolver, my hand shaking, and called out to him. The figure didn't move, didn't make a sound. It just stood there, an obsidian statue in the heart of the city's decay. I took a step forward, and then another, my heart pounding in my chest. The air grew thick and cold, and a strange, metallic smell filled my nostrils. As I got closer, I could see that he was holding something in his hand, a long, slender object that glinted in the moonlight, a surgeon's scalpel. My blood ran cold. This was him. This was the butcher. I raised my gun, my finger tightening on the trigger. But before I could fire, he turned and melted into the shadows, disappearing as if he had never been there. I was left standing alone in the oppressive silence of Kingsbury Run. The only evidence of his presence, the lingering scent of blood, and the icy grip of fear that clutched at my soul. I reported the incident, of course, but my superiors were skeptical. A shadow in the dark, a figment of a young cop's overactive imagination, they said. But I knew what I had seen, and I knew that we were not just hunting a man. We were hunting a ghost, a specter of death that had made the blighted industrial landscape of Cleveland its own personal hunting ground. The killings continued, each one more gruesome, more audacious than the last. The city lived in a state of suspended terror. The newspapers ran sensational headlines, fueling the public's fear and fascination with the mad butcher. The police were a constant presence in the shantytowns, their interrogations often brutal and fruitless. The real killer, the shadow I had seen, remained elusive. One evening, a message was found scrawled in blood on the steps of the Justice Center. A direct challenge to Eliot Ness. "You'll never catch me," it read. The arrogance, the sheer audacity of it, sent a fresh wave of terror through the city. The butcher was not just a killer. He was a performer, and the city of Cleveland was his stage. My own obsession with the case grew. I spent my off-duty hours poring over the case files, trying to find some pattern, some clue that everyone else had missed. I became withdrawn, haunted by the specter of the butcher. My nights were filled with nightmares of dismembered bodies and a tall, shadowy figure with a surgeon's scalpel. Then came the night that would forever alter the course of my life. I was on patrol in a particularly desolate part of Kingsbury Run, a place where the crumbling remains of abandoned factories cast long, menacing shadows. A thick, unnatural fog had rolled in from the river, muffling all sound and creating an eerie, dreamlike atmosphere. It was in that disorienting fog that I heard it. A faint, rhythmic sound, like the slow, deliberate sharpening of a blade. I followed the sound, my hand resting on the butt of my revolver, my senses on high alert. The sound led me to an old, abandoned slaughterhouse, its windows dark and gaping like empty eye sockets. Against my better judgment, I pushed open the creaking door and stepped inside. The air was thick with the coppery smell of old blood, and a deep, penetrating cold chilled me to the bone. The only light came from a single, bare bulb hanging from the ceiling, casting a weak, yellow glow on the gruesome scene below. There, in the center of the room, was the butcher. He was standing over a makeshift operating table, his back to me. On the table lay the naked, dismembered torso of a woman. The butcher was humming a jaunty tune, the sound a grotesque counterpoint to the horrific act he was performing. As I stood there, frozen in a mixture of terror and disbelief, he turned around. His face was a pale, emotionless mask, his eyes as cold and empty as a winter sky. He smiled, a thin, cruel smile that did not reach his eyes. And then he spoke, his voice a low, gravelly whisper that seemed to echo in the cavernous space. "So, you finally found my little workshop," he said. In that moment, I understood that I was not facing a man, but something else entirely. The sheer, unadulterated evil that emanated from him was a palpable force, a suffocating presence that threatened to overwhelm me. I raised my gun, but my hand was trembling so violently that I could barely hold it steady. He took a step towards me, the scalpel in his hand, glinting in the dim light. "There's no need for that," he said, his voice laced with a chilling amusement. "We're just getting to know each other." He was toying with me, savoring my fear. I was a mouse in the clutches of a cat, a helpless victim in the face of an ancient, predatory evil. A strange, otherworldly strength surged through me, a primal instinct for survival. I fired my revolver, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. The bullet struck him in the shoulder, But he barely flinched. He just smiled that same cold smile and continued to advance. I fired again and again, emptying my gun, but he was unstoppable. He was on me in an instant, his strength supernatural. He disarmed me with ease, the scalpel now pressed against my throat. I could feel its cold, sharp edge against my skin, and the metallic scent of his breath filled my nostrils. I closed my eyes, bracing for the end, but it never came. Instead, he leaned in close, his lips brushing against my ear. "This is not your time," he whispered. "You will be my messenger. You will tell them what you have seen. You will tell them that the Butcher of Kingsbury Run is not a man, but a force of nature, a shadow that will forever haunt this city." And then he was gone. I was left alone in the slaughterhouse, the dismembered body on the table, a gruesome testament to the evil I had just encountered. I stumbled out into the foggy night, my mind shattered, my soul forever scarred. I tried to tell my superiors what had happened, but they didn't believe me. They thought I had finally snapped under the pressure of the case. I was taken off the force, deemed mentally unfit for duty. I became a recluse, a ghost in my own right, haunted by the memory of that night in the slaughterhouse. The killings stopped as abruptly as they had begun, but the fear remained, a lingering poison in the city's veins. The case of the Cleveland torso murderer was never solved. Eliot Ness, the famed lawman, left the city in defeat. The butcher, the shadow I had met, was never caught. He had simply vanished, leaving behind a legacy of terror and a dozen or more unsolved murders. Years have passed since that fateful night. I am an old man now, my hair as white as the winter snow, but the memory of the butcher still haunts my waking hours and my dreams. I can still see his cold, empty eyes, still hear his gravelly whisper, still feel the cold steel of his scalpel against my skin. Sometimes, on cold, foggy nights, I walk the deserted streets of Kingsbury Run. The shanty towns are long gone, replaced by new buildings and highways, but the ghost of the butcher still lingers. I can feel his presence in the shadows, a cold, malevolent energy that permeates the very air. And I know, with a certainty that chills me to my very core, that he is still out there, somewhere. He is not a man of flesh and blood, but a timeless, ancient evil that feeds on fear and despair. And one day, when the city has forgotten, when the memory of his reign of terror has faded into the mists of time, he will return. So the next time you feel a chill crawl up your spine in the forgotten corners of a city, the next time you feel that you are being watched by something unseen, remember my story. Remember the mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run, and pray that you are not his next victim, for he is the ghost of Cleveland, a specter of death that will forever haunt the city's darkest corners, waiting, watching, and biding his time.